folks, Ty here. Hope everybody is doing well and preparing for their Thanksgiving holiday. Hope you guys get to and from your destination safely, by the way. So, while we're heading into that time frame here, we're reaching the end pretty much here. 2024 is zoomed by very quickly. We just did the December outlook a couple of days ago, and now we're looking at the second to last, or maybe even the last seasonal outlook here. So, of course, we're looking at winter at this point. Not too much has changed from the last outlook, but we're going to go over some of the minor changes that we've had here. We'll probably do a follow-up video, maybe middle to late next month. We'll see how things pan out from that point. But there have been a few changes that I've made note of on this map here for the entire winter season. Now we're looking at two of these, by the way. We're going to start out with the December, January, February 3-month time frame, and then we're going to extend all the way from January, February into March. So both the tabs are here. This is the other one that we just mentioned. So this is going to carry us pretty much into the new year from this point. So I want you to pay attention in particular to how things transition from these maps here. So of course, like I said before, we're starting out with the month of December here and moving on from that point. And right now, from what we've seen, and this has been no secret, we have a very weak La Nina. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if we start to even trend towards maybe a neutral phase in the ENSO right here. You can actually see it on the chart here. We're looking at the negative 0.5 degrees Celsius in the Pacific Ocean waters that we call ENSO, the Nino 3.4 as it's also better called as. And as you can see, we're like right on the edge of being at negative 0.5 degrees Celsius. Once we get in between there and positive 0.5, that's actually what you would consider a neutral phase ENSO here. Anything above 0.5 degrees Celsius is considered an El Nino. But this actually could have some pretty dramatic effects on our winter here, because usually when we have a stronger La Nina or El Nino, there are some key characteristics that we look for. The neutral phase often tends to be a little bit of a wild card here. And you'll notice that more as we go further along here, especially as we get towards the other time frame here. What you're seeing right now in December, January, and February here, this still has the look of mostly a classic La Nina, not a super strong setup, and I don't think this will be a constant here. I do think the southeast ridge, however, will be a constant, and these temperatures being above average here will be constant as well. Hence the reflection of those above normal temperature probabilities here being in the 50 to 60 percentile range. Southwest, this is pretty common as well. But I do think that there are going to be opportunities, especially towards the Midwest, where we could have some more significant cold blasts and maybe even some winter weather coming into play, especially as we get beyond the new year here. A lot of this, of course, is going to depend on how the jet stream interacts with the lower 48 as a whole here. But one thing that I'm making note of here is the storm track has really been favoring the northern states. So I would expect much in the way of wintry precipitation, especially over towards maybe the Dakotas and Montana as well. Not uncommon for you guys, but you may get more snow than normal over here. And of course, sometimes when we have that snow thawing, depending on how things pan out towards the other half of winter, could determine whether we have ice jams and then river flooding, etc. over here. Because I remember in 2008 in particular, I think, well, really 2008 to 2011, I think, especially over towards North Dakota, flooding was a big problem there. So some concerns are risen from that, but nothing's guaranteed, especially looking into the range that we're looking at here. This is into ridiculously long range here, basically uncharted territory at this point. But over towards the southern states, I do think there also may be opportunities for severe weather. Again, a lot of that depends on how the jet stream interacts here. But if we end up having that warm air in place in large part due to the southeast ridge and any sort of cold blast, depending on if we can get a strong surface low and some good wind shear, we could have a couple of significant severe events even. Again, a lot of this is just more or less theory at this point, or hearsay as I like to call it. Another thing that kind of helps me helps verify my thought process behind this is the precipitation here. As you can see over towards the northwest, we're extremely active. We're currently dealing with an atmospheric river over here towards the northwest now, and I do think that there will be more chances for additional events to occur throughout the season here. So definitely need to be on watch here, whether you're towards the northwest, over towards the Sierras, And even though these areas right now are showing equal chances of precipitation, I do think there could be a potential for an extension of this area in the green here to push a little further to the south here. Would not surprise me in the slightest. As of right now, there's equal chances of precipitation over towards the Dakotas right here. Still kind of leery of that, not going to lie. Hoping that this actually verifies instead of what I just theorized in recent time here. But nonetheless here, another thing to make that I'm making note of also is for spring, this region over here towards the southwest being exceptionally dry with those higher below average precip probabilities here could help aid in our spring severe season with the elevated mix layer. It's a little bit of weather lingo for the more advanced people in the weather here. But in any case though, another common occurrence with the La Nina setup here is also towards the southeast. They tend to be a little bit drier. Battle zones sometimes will be towards the Ohio Valley, and depending on the jet stream, it pushes a little bit further south towards the southern Appalachians, maybe even as far south as Atlanta, Birmingham, etc. But we'll have to see how things pan out from there. Storm track right now, like I said before, really kind of favors the northern states, but it's not uncommon to get those little sudden dips. And those dips tend to be a little bit more common with a weaker La Nina too, so not a guarantee that we're going to have a super dry winter over here. We may still get some we still may get some notable changes here with this, but we'll just have to see how things pan out. We'll really get a little bit of a better idea with the month to month, and of course once we get within the 2-week time frame, confidence increases notably by that point. But in any case though, a couple other things I'm making note of here, and I didn't mention it on the temperature map, but I did see the below average temperature probability over here towards southeastern Alaska, which kind of helps verify that below average temperature reading over here towards the northwest. Interesting thing to make note of here is southeast Alaska looks very dry, and then over towards the north it's pretty busy. Over here it looks like notable signal for above average chances of precipitation up there. But of course, like I said before, we're looking at a 90-day time frame here in both cases, so like I said, a lot to really take in at this point, and a lot to really consider to go along with it. So as we go further along, very similar signal as we get into January, February, March here, especially with the below average temperature probabilities. In particular, I'm thinking that we're going to see an increase in warmth over here to the deep south, and a little bit of a push from the cold air a little bit further out to the east. We're starting to see more of Minnesota and also maybe even parts of the Midwest coming into play here. Again, like I said, it's those collisions of air masses that really kind of have me interested here. Obviously, at this range, we aren't going to really have too much in the way of model data available. Even ensemble data will struggle at this point. But some things that this is one thing that I'm kind of keeping note of at this point. I do think that maybe by February, maybe even as early as late January, severe chances may actually increase. And this has become more of a common occurrence, especially over towards the Dixie Alley region. So depending on moisture returns and of course the jet stream could be in business over here, of course. Plenty of warm air seems like it's going to be set up over towards this region just based off of this look. But then again, like I said, 90-day time frame going off a 90-day average, a little tough to go make a forecast that early and have any sort of confidence in it. Another thing that I'm making mention of once more is the signal is pretty identical to the last 3 months, but notice that there is a much stronger above average precip signal over towards the Ohio Valley and the Great Lakes. So moisture comes into play. It's going to be a little bit cold over here, so I think this could be a battle zone for winter weather. And then further to the south, again, depending on atmospheric parameters, severe weather could become a factor, especially as we get, let's say, into February and March. Tennessee Valley could be coming into play as well. Also, there may be a chance of elevated EML over here thanks to these below average precip signals we're seeing over here towards the desert southwest. So like I said, a lot really taken at this point. Pretty similar signal over towards Alaska, which I find interesting as well. The below average precip probabilities are notable over here, with the above average precip probabilities being notable over towards the northern half of the state here. So like I said, a lot of things to take into consideration here. Very interesting look on the weather models here as a whole. So a big factor in a lot of what we could see is, of course, the oscillations. And the main thing that I'm taking note of here are two particular oscillations over here. We have the Arctic oscillation over here, which is towards the North Pole, and then the North Atlantic oscillation over towards Greenland. So as we look towards January, this is where I think that cold air really starts to come into play for those northeastern states here. We see I would almost dare to call this maybe a neutral phased Arctic oscillation or neutral AO. We have a decent amount of pressure here, but we don't have an insanely low amount of pressure here. You see the existence of both, but I think we're kind of, if anything, transitioning maybe into a positive phase. And the same could be said for the NAO oscillation as well. But when we have that, or if we're like on the edge of maybe being in a negative phase over here, we end up getting more cold air available to seep down into the northeast. And keep in mind, this is a 30-day average that I'm looking at on here, so nothing set in stone here, just an early signal that I'm looking at this point. Interesting thing to make note of here, February in particular, we see a really strong signal for a negative NAO phase and maybe a neutral, maybe slipping just out of a negative AO phase as well. So over towards the northern states and the northeast, it looks like we're going to be dealing with some cold air making its way to the lower 48 here. Just how far south that goes is still questionable at this point. Another area that I want to make note of over here is just off the Aleutians here towards Alaska. I'm always watching this area whenever we see this signal here, because this could allot for additional cold air to come into play here. And usually whenever we see this signal, sometimes the two initial word here that a lot of people get worried about comes into play here. One that I'm somewhat reluctant to say, but polar vortex or stratospheric heating. Usually the signal starts with something like this. This isn't the exact case with this, and of course, like I said before, we're really looking into February at this point already, and it's pretty premature to say that this will cause a polar vortex, but definitely a signal that I'm going to be keeping an extra close eye on as we go forward here. But as we go further along with this, as we head into March, I want to make note of the fact that we still have this big mass of cold air over here towards Western Canada that looks like it's going to try to sink its way south, and then a warm air mass that looks like it tries to come into play over towards the south here. So again, kind of makes me raise a brow and wonder if severe weather may come into play as we get towards the latter half of winter here. There's a lot of time left to elapse before we could even verify this signal. So like I said, more or less hearsay, but we're looking for consistency at this point, but definitely a trend that we're going to start to be keeping our eyes peeled for on the channel here. So hopefully you join me to keep an eye on that trend as well. But based off of what we're currently seeing from models as a whole here, looking at the month to month here, December looks like a well above average month for almost the entire lower 48, especially towards the deep south. Those above average temperatures are going to be running rampant. So we get towards January, we kind of level off a little bit, and it's really February and into March where we start to see some variable conditions and the more notable below average temperatures come into play here. Like I said, looking out as far as we are, you could easily have this stuff thrown out the window by the time we get into the next update here, which will be probably right around December 1st at this point, and then the final update literally like the day before the official start of the winter solstice. But interesting stuff that we're seeing here for sure here. Those above average temperatures are going to be pretty much running rampant across the deep south in abundance at this point. And those below average temperatures, depending on how far we can get that sinking cold air to push south, definitely think severe weather is possible here. Depending on how the jet stream interacts, winter storms will probably be pretty rampant across the northern states, maybe the Midwest as well. I do think areas like maybe Minnesota, maybe Iowa and Wisconsin could be points of interest as well in regards to winter weather. Everywhere else, it's pretty variable at this point still. Like I said, still pretty early though, so don't count anything until it's happening essentially at this point is all I really want to say. And last but not least on this video, we're going to be taking a look at the precip values that we could see on the month to month here. So some interesting things that I picked up on, of course, that anticipated northern jet stream is definitely going to come into play here. It is going to probably bring a few chances of some winter weather to the Midwest here, but I'm really thinking the Great Lakes are going to be the point of interest here, along with the Northwest and the Sierras here. Very notable signals in regards to above average precipitation. So right now, maybe 2 inches for this upcoming month. So go further along, we kind of level out a little bit with the weather pattern here. I do think, again, Northwest is going to be the most active area of this season. And then over towards the Gulf Coast is a question mark. Severe weather chances are probably going to be the most dominant thing here. The occasional cold blast, maybe even some winter weather, can't be ruled out over here towards the deep south, but for the most part, I think above average temperatures will be reigning supreme. But interesting signal here once we get towards February, huh? As I mentioned before, wherever we see that collision of air masses here, with this signal here, definitely kind of leads me have just a little bit more confidence in maybe an earlier start to severe season, especially maybe over towards Dixie Alley in the Ohio Valley here. And look how strong this signal gets in regards to above average precip over here towards the Northwest here. We can actually, based off this signal here, it could be about 2, 3, maybe even 4 inches above average here. So that's something to pay attention to, of course. Then as we get towards March, you see that above average or that wet signal push a little bit further off towards the east here. So now we're getting the deep south involved. We're starting to get the mid-Atlantic involved as well. So very interesting pattern. Looks like it could take shape if this indeed verifies towards the end of winter into the start of spring. So could be some busy times ahead here. But that being said, hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'm gonna try to keep knocking them down here. Make sure you guys hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. Also, if you have it, feel free to check out memberships here. Only is $1 a month. So that being said, I hope to see you guys in the next video. Till then, take care and have an awesome rest of your Saturday.